Hello, listeners. Welcome back to Untangling Climate Finance, brought to you by Gordian Strategies. I'm your host, Jay Tipton. In today's episode, I'll be discussing the intersection of climate finance and digital technology with a razor-sharp guest, Anna Lerner, the CEO of Climate Collective. Anna has had an incredible background in climate finance and tech. From her early days working on the ground in Africa, to a role at the World Bank, and then on to Meta for some time, before finally where she is now, leading the Climate Collective, which is a community driving innovation through tech like AI, blockchain, and geospatial data to accelerate global climate action. Taking advantage of Anna's impressive resume and expertise, we discuss the current state of climate finance. We're not just talking about the funding needed to tackle climate change, but also the massive and problematic subsidies that continue to support harmful industries like fossil fuels. Anna highlights how these subsidies, totaling trillions of US dollars, are undermining global climate efforts and making it even harder to hit our critical collective targets. Anna and I also take a deep dive into one of Climate Collective's areas of expertise, how cutting-edge tech can be a game changer in the fight against climate change. Now, whether it's AI improving climate modeling or geospatial data enabling real-time monitoring of deforestation, technology plays a critical role in scaling solutions. But, as you'll hear Anna point out, there are also challenges, like ensuring that tech doesn't inadvertently support activities that contribute to climate problems, as we've seen lately with AI aiding fossil fuel companies through the likes of Microsoft. In this episode, we also explore the work Anna is doing through their Green Accountability Tech Accelerator, where they're working in partnership with the World Bank to help climate finance reach the communities that need it most. Anna also introduces their upcoming AI accelerator, launching later this year. It aims to empower diverse AI founders, mainly from underrepresented communities, to create climate solutions tailored to their local needs. Anna's thoughts on the current state, as well as the future of climate tech and finance, are invaluable, especially as we look to make every single dollar count in the fight against climate change. This conversation is absolutely packed with incredible insights, so let's jump in. Hi, Anna. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you so much, Jay. I'm doing really well, thank you.
Glad to hear it. So let's just dig into it. Why don't we start off with you just telling me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, maybe a bit of your career path?
Absolutely. I am born and raised in northern Sweden. I lived in Spain for a little bit when I was younger, and then I continued to do some extensive solo traveling in South America before I returned to Sweden to attend the University of Lund. So born and bred in Sweden with a little bit of international sparkle around it, I'd say. I'm an international economist. I really focused on poverty reduction and climate at university, which was a bit unusual in, 2003 to 2007 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
My first job was building energy efficient cook stove markets in sub-Saharan Africa, also a very unusual first job.
Wow.
A project we managed to get registered with the gold standard, and then we couldn't find anyone to buy the credits because I think we were one of the first cook stove projects that ever were given carbon credits. So that was an interesting start to my career. After some years, I joined the World Bank in Washington, D.C. I started at the Global Environment Facility, which, as you know, it's hosted inside the World Bank, but it really is the financing mechanism of UNFCCC. So at the heart of climate finance, if you will. And then I spent many years between the Caribbean, Latin America energy teams and the global connectivity and innovation teams across the bank, always really working on data and tech for sustainable development. And most recently, before Climate Collective, I worked for Meta for a couple of years, where I was in charge of their response or their programming for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. That really meant, setting strategy, building up programming and investments, securing corporate budget to support specific SDG outcomes, and then coordinate the many distributed teams across the company that were working on delivering some of these commitments. I think I've always been a translator or a bit of a bridge builder between different industries, stakeholders and community and market actors.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it. And I'm actually in Norway at the moment, so I'm not too far from your home country.
Norway, I shouldn't say this as a Swede, but Norway is one of my favorite places to go.
Yeah, I think you're allowed to say that because I think most people that come here totally appreciate its beauty for sure.
Yes.
And also I was going to say it's quite interesting because, I have a lot of these conversations and most people transition or pivot into the climate change space, but you actually are one of the few that I've spoken with that have started there originally.
Yeah, I know. It's weird. It wasn't really called climate change in the beginning,
Right.
but I was working for GIZ, which are the German Development Corporation, when I was in Africa. And the first training I attended was it was in German. I don't know. I don't remember how you said that in German now, but how to mainstream climate adaptation across our programming. This is like 2007. No one was talking about this at the time. I was like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Well, you're certainly ahead of the curve and you've had a nice trajectory, it sounds like. And so that leads us to Climate Collective. Why don't you tell me a bit about Climate Collective, how you started the company, and then what are your key focus areas?
Yeah, absolutely. Climate Collective is a leading community of entrepreneurs, investors, nonprofits, and scientists that are all working with some type of digital technology. So we're talking AI, sensors, blockchain, maybe mobile payments, geospatial, and for climate and nature action at scale. So all focused on climate or nature using digital tech and innovations. Our mission really as an organization is to unlock technology and data innovations to accelerate the progress towards local and global climate and nature goals. We don't think digital tech and innovation is going to solve it all. Obviously, there's lots of other issues that we need to fix too, and we can talk about them later. But we do think this digital tech and data is really important to accelerate the progress. We don't have a lot of time left and not enough money. So we need to be smart about what we do and how we do it. And that's really where we think digital tech and data is so impactful. And how it started, Climate Collective was really started on the back of a conviction by the founders of a green blockchain called Cello. They wanted to use technology and finance as vectors to build a more regenerative economy. They then came to a couple of us and said, could you create some sort of community movement or some sort of entity that can support this objective? And that's how Climate Collective was really initiated. So it's sort of a community building effort at the heart of it. We started as a C Corp, but we're now in the final stages of establishing ourselves as a 501c3 because that really better reflects the type of activities we're doing.
Excellent. It's kind of funny because you said earlier how like you were working in climate change before a lot of people were talking about it and giving certain titles to certain things that we now kind of take for granted today, one of which is climate finance. I think if you talk to a lot of people, they probably still aren't very clear on what the definition of climate finance is, even though it's kind of all around. And so you at Climate Collective, and then also you just through your journey in this space, you probably have a pretty good sense of where we are today with climate finance. I know that some of your reports talk about this. So could you provide what your perspective of like the current state of climate finance is and maybe how this year has performed versus past years?
Yes. This is a tricky subject actually, because people have such different perspectives of what climate finance is. And I don't decide the definitions, but I'll give you my take and sort of what I'm observing, having been in this space for a good number of years. Well, I think the current state is that there's more attention given to this topic than ever before. This is a topic that's, my mom is talking about this these days. And that to me is a good bar for like how mainstream is this concept. Less good news though is we're still really falling short on mobilizing the type of investments we need. I think we need to like fivefold the climate finance we have access to today. I know that from 2021 to 2022, there was quite a big bump. And I think we reached 1.3 trillion worth of investments toward climate related projects. But to honestly hit the Paris Agreement's 1.5 degree limits, or at least get close to it, let's say, we need to increase that level by a factor of 5. And that's not an easy feat. These numbers become so vast, they're really hard to comprehend. Mm-hmm. A more approachable way might be to think about it as like climate finance is all the money that comes from the government and the private sector towards positive climate action. Mm-hmm. That could sort of be defined as climate finance. And you asked about 2024. I mean, we're just halfway through, a little more, but a lot of big things have happened, and I think some are still to come. A couple of trends I've noted is in this year, I think we've seen a new awareness around the negative types of subsidies that are undermining climate finance. So we have insanely large subsidies for fossil fuel production, agriculture, mining, etc. I think we spend a research that came out, I think this morning or something, that said the world spends $2.6 trillion on harmful subsidies per year, and about 1 trillion is on fossil fuels. So going back to okay, we got up to 1.3 trillion worth of climate investments, but we're spending 2.6 trillion, so a lot more, on harmful subsidies.
Mm-hmm.
That is undermining all of our efforts and all of our climate finance. That doesn't make any sense, right? So that's definitely an issue. This year, I think, has also seen a lot of confusion around what corporate climate investments should look like. Maybe you've already done a podcast episode on this, because this really deserves its own story, but it's a lot of confusion about what it is and how corporate contributions or investments should look like and how they should be accounted for. I really think we need to resolve that quickly if we're going to get serious about meeting our Paris goals, because there's no way public funding on its own can fix all that needs to be fixed. We really need corporate and business to contribute. So we need to make it much clearer what they need to do in order to contribute. And perhaps the most exciting thing looking forward about climate finance this year is that in December at COP29, they will recommend a new target for global climate finance. And it's just a target and it's just a recommendation, but that still sets sort of the direction of travel in a way. So I'm excited about that. I hope they really make a big effort and get to a substantial number, because there's no way we can really fund the national determined contribution and all of the other things we need to do unless we significantly scale up climate finance.
Without a doubt, the number has been 100 billion the last 5 years, and we've fallen short of the 100 billion. But then when you take that number and you compare it to the trillions that we need, you're like, wait a second, even this objective that we're trying to hit and most of the times we're not hitting is still a fraction of the overall money that we need. I'm glad that it's going to be back on the table as a discussion, because it has to scale without a doubt.
And also, I mean, in a way, the 2.6 trillion we're wasting on subsidies, that means that we have the money. The money is there.
Yeah.
I think we spent 11 trillion on COVID response. There is money. There's just maybe the political will isn't quite there right now, but
yeah, and that's always, of course, the trickiest balance to figure out is the political will behind things and the ever changing nature of the attitudes of the people that are making the decisions. But yeah, I do think what you said earlier is exactly on point, which is that trying to get more clarity on what or where the money should be going is also very helpful, right? Because this is still a pretty opaque thing in terms of what is money that could be in the gray area of helping versus clearly something negative versus something that's very clearly obvious.
Yep.
So I think that has been a big trend in 2024, and hopefully we see more of that in 2025.
Yep.
Of course, at Climate Collective, you guys focus a lot on tech, and a lot of climate finance has been going towards tech. I think that tech has been a massive topic throughout the year. And so why don't you kind of bridge those two? Why don't you talk about climate finance and then how you've seen that impacting AI, blockchain, geospatial, anything else that you guys keep your eye on?
Yeah, absolutely. And just, I mean, to kind of start off, we at Climate Collective, we're pretty good at picking a topic. We've done 3 topics so far. And then we structure sort of cohorts and communities around them where we find like-minded entrepreneurs that are building tech or other sort of data solutions to address those challenges or those opportunities. Our big focus cohorts have been one on carbon markets, one on nature tech, and our most recent one was on green accountability. Green accountability is really sort of at heart of actually climate finance and transparency, but we can get to that later. First, on tech, AI, just like blockchain and other exponential technologies, can really have transformational impact on our ability to address climates. I've worked on tech, my whole career on purpose of sort of sustainable development, and I've seen so many breakthroughs and so many exponential changes. But that said, they can also be used to significantly delay decarbonization and have a substantial nature and energy footprint themselves, just these technologies. People are quite actively talking about the energy consumption of data centers. I think it's a complicated conversation. And I think it goes back to, what are these data centers used for? If it's just to produce new, I don't know, cat videos, whatever people did before, or just like meaningless TikTok videos that people spend their time on instead of doing productive things, then I would rather use that energy to give access to electricity to people in, sub-Saharan Africa, the 700 million that still don't have access to electricity, for example.
Yeah.
But then if it's being used for impactful things, if it's helping to strengthen sort of some of the climate modeling that we can do today, which we couldn't do before because we have much better data, then I'm more interested in supporting this growth at data centers. So I think it's a little complicated, actually. I know you alluded to this, but earlier this week, there were talks about how Microsoft's cloud and AI solutions were helping fossil fuel companies to increase their efficiencies across operations and actually like support the efficiency of logistics of fossil fuel delivery.
Right.
That doesn't make me very excited. I don't think that's very helpful or in line with the Paris Agreement. So I'm kind of excited to see a response from Microsoft there. But again, like we know that, large language models help, for example, to translate government websites, help inform citizens about their opportunities, or help them report concerns in dialects that weren't covered before. So there's so many good uses of these technologies that it's not a very easy answer. The climate impact of these technologies and how it really levels out. I just don't think that we can't tide the turn. No, you don't say it in English. You can't turn the tide. That's how you say it. You can't turn the tide. We can't stop it now. We can't say, okay, no one can use AI anymore. That doesn't work. So we need to find a way to be responsible about how we use it and be very careful about what we're enabling, kind of what end uses we're supporting with these technologies.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We can't put it back in the box. There's no way. We know that it's extremely powerful. We know that AI moves quickly. And as you had pointed out, it is in some circumstances being used very positively. And then in some circumstances, helping Microsoft help the oil and gas industry become more effective in their drilling. And so it's such an interesting topic. Microsoft alone could have a whole episode about that, because on one hand, they are really driving forward carbon markets in terms of purchasing carbon dioxide removal credits and really kind of like lifting all of the boats with all of their purchases and efforts and advanced purchase agreements.
Yep.
And then on the other hand, as you said, massive energy consumption for some things that aren't really that helpful. And so it's a fascinating subject. And I think that as we continue to go forward in the rest of this year, I do think that there will be a lot more discussions about that. I want to pull it back to, you guys released a 2-part report. I think the first one came out at the end of 2023, and then the second one came out maybe halfway through this year, and it was about harnessing AI to transform climate action. Maybe you want to talk about it a little bit more specifically so that our listeners who haven't read the report have an idea of some of the ways that you envision AI being held with the overall initiative.
Absolutely. No, thanks for pointing that out. And actually, I'm really excited to announce that we will actually do a lot more on AI going forward. We're going to launch a specific accelerator on AI and climate action. So part of this research work that we did was to start to kind of map out, like, where are the big opportunities? Where are there less exciting opportunities that we can kind of set aside for now? And where are some of the research that still needs to be done to enable some of these? So more to come on this topic from us, but we released 2 reports, and one was kind of a high level 101 type of report that outlined what AI is, how you can use it, and how it can generally support our climate and nature goals. And then the second piece was more like almost like a future looking vision of what the world could look like if we managed to leverage AI for positive climate and nature outcomes. So it was like re-envisioning the agricultural sector, reimagining life in cities. It was kind of futuristic and fun to write. And the second report also talks a little bit about some AI features that are not quite mainstream yet, like causal discovery and interference AI, or explainable, verifiable, and reproducible AI. Those are things that we think will be really useful in the future, but they're not available for everyone yet. And I think the key message from both of these is, for the first time, data scarcity isn't this like primary barrier to effective coordination and climate action. Like, we're inundated with data. Now the challenge really lies in interpreting this data and leveraging this massive information we have effectively. So we have a table in there that outlines how you can think of sort of interference analytics, which is more about like what happened, prediction analytics that looks at what will happen, and then counterfactual analytics that sort of takes the pose of like what would happen if this and that occurs. And we created a table where anyone can go in and look, and you can see sort of how you can use those type of applied researches across lots of different areas of climate. So if you're curious about AI and you kind of want to learn a little bit more, I'm happy to link those reports in the notes so people can access them.
Yeah, I definitely will do that. I will put those in the show notes, and I will make sure that when I send this episode out in our newsletter, I'll include those as well, because definitely I thought that the first one, as you had said, the 101 was a very good introductory AI take to wrap your head around it. And I think that the second one, it's kind of perfect, right? Because AI is, to a lot of people, very unknown, right? Like, we talk about it as if we really understand it, and we don't so much. And that kind of also is interesting because it lends to the fact that there is a lot of creativity behind it, and that it could be applicable to stuff that we haven't really thought about. And I thought that your second report did a really good job of giving these circumstances or situations where maybe AI isn't being used for that yet, but given its power and given the direction that it's heading, it could be applicable in other dreamy type of situations. And I think that that's also an interesting part about AI in general, is that it's just like, it gives us a key to dream or to imagine stuff.
Yeah. I mean, by dreaming and by visioning or imagining, we can also direct it. We can also sort of drive it towards a certain outcome. And I think that's really important. Instead of sort of sitting by and being scared and concerned, it might be more effective to jump in and try to learn about it and understand, sort of, reimagine what it could do and how it could help us, and then try to sort of drive it in that direction.
Yeah, I totally agree. I wanted to talk about one of the other techs that you focus on at Climate Collective, and that's geospatial. And I think it is helpful because you obviously have a lot of experience in the carbon markets, and so do we at Gordian Knot. And geospatial is a very interesting tech. And I think that is another one that in 2024 and 2023 has seen a lot of momentum in terms of its sophistication, and really smart companies out there that are really pushing along their tech offerings in geospatial, and then the mountain of positive impacts that can have, like on the nature restoration, nature protection, carbon markets, et cetera. So is there any interesting trends or conversations that you've been having in your space specifically about geospatial?
Yes, I think this is such a time for what we call DMRV, which is really digital monitoring, reporting, and verification, which has always been a cornerstone of carbon markets. But now, leveraging the digital technologies and the data we have accessible today, it's just so much more powerful. We did a report last year together with RMI that talks about data integrity across carbon markets. And as you know, you are all very involved in this, but there are lots and lots of efforts focusing process integrity. So what I mean with process integrity is, some new principles of engagement, or kind of new labels or accreditations for different methodologies or programs. But our argument was, unless we also look at data integrity, unless we look at the quality of data that's underlying these projects, these methodologies, or these certifications or verifications, it doesn't really matter that we improve the process integrity. So geospatial for me is that. It's what's solving some of our data integrity issues. It really just provides much more granular, much more high fidelity, highly credible data on what is happening on the ground. This is mostly maybe relevant for nature-based solutions, but also for technology solutions in some cases. And it's just a suite of technologies that allows us to observe things almost in real time at a fraction of the cost of what sending, people or doing some of these lengthy sample surveys would allow us to do. So digital MRV was one of these topics when it started bubbling a little bit within the climate collective some 3-4 years ago. I'm like, yes, this is really going to help. But I think it took a little while before the industry, kind of the established players, got excited about it. But now I feel like it's really, everyone that talks about high quality, high integrity credits, geospatial is to a large extent what is powering those statements.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it's just taken off in the last 18 months and a lot of excitement about it. And as you said, it really does. It fills in a lot of gaps in terms of data. It almost like gives us another set of eyes in a way. It's very exciting stuff, I think.
Even if you can observe that a massive deforestation event had occurred a couple of months later, it doesn't matter. Like, it's already happened. The damage is already done, right? But if you can see it the day it happens or the day after it happens, and then maybe complement geospatial with audio sensors or other type of on-the-ground sensors, then we can really track these things and catch them essentially in the action and prevent some of these really damaging events to happen.
For sure. And I imagine governments, especially those that have vast swaths of forest and natural assets they want to protect, are going to very much be leaning into this. And I anticipate in 2025, we'll probably see a lot of partnerships of governments on a national or a subnational level with some of these geospatial companies to address exactly that, to give them an extra set of tools.
Totally. Yep. Couldn't agree more.
So you guys at Climate Collective also have another interesting facet of your business, and that's the Green Accountability Tech Accelerator. And I had read on your guys' website that you recently partnered with the World Bank's Global Partnership for Social Accountability to test and scale tech solutions that bridge existing gaps in transparency, accountability, and participation in climate finance, which is cool. That's a really, really cool initiative. So why don't you tell the listeners more about that and maybe explain what the Accelerator program is?
Yes, absolutely. This is really interesting. I stumbled upon a World Bank report that was released last year that quantified, in some cases, like hundreds of billions of dollars that could be saved from using green accountability. And I'm like, what? Why is no one talking about this? What is this? So I reached out to a couple of former colleagues at the bank and started learning more about what this is. And it resulted in us partnering with this team inside the bank around this Green Accountability Tech Accelerator. But let me back up. What is this? So green accountability is such a neat thing. It extends the principles of social accountability, which has, for the last 20 years, has been a really big thing in international development, that you want to make sure that people, communities have sort of an involvement and a voice and an agency in their lives, right? So it extends these principles into climate. The goal is really to empower individuals and communities to ensure that climate finance is used effectively, equitably, and transparently. And the idea is, by prioritizing this type of inclusion and participation, green accountability can maximize the impact of every dollar invested in climate action, or even avoid dollars wasted. I'll dig out the link to that report that the bank published, but we actually released a blog this morning together with the World Bank, highlighting some of these projects around the world that are using green accountability and sharing a couple of updates from our tech accelerator. Actually, I have to share this example because I love them so much. They're such a great team. One of the team we have in the accelerator is an indigenous-led group. It's coming out of Colombia, and it's called Savimbo. They identified payment systems and access to bank accounts as a barrier for a lot of indigenous peoples and communities to participate in carbon markets. So because some of them, and many of them, are not bankable, it's hard for them to be compensated for their participation. So instead, they're now building an open source digital payment solution that only requires a mobile phone and makes it much easier for project developers to compensate indigenous peoples fairly for their participation in carbon or biodiversity markets, including building mechanisms that actually allows the community to be compensated each time a carbon credit or a biodiversity credit is traded in the future. So it's not just a one-off payment in the beginning, but they actually get to have a small proceed in the increase of the value of this asset. And for those of us who actually believe in carbon markets or biodiversity markets as mechanisms to drive climate finance towards these much needed projects, this is great news, because I think these markets will grow in the future, and I want indigenous people and local communities to get their fair share of this. So that's really kind of what green accountability is about. It helps us make sure we spend our money more wisely and more impactfully. It involves people and just drives to sort of a more equitable and fair transition.
That is an absolutely brilliant program. I love that. That is so good. I think because, as you know, and as I know well enough, and any of the people that listen that are involved in the carbon markets, that is one of the biggest challenges, is making sure that the money actually gets to the people on the ground who are implementing the programs, and especially the indigenous or the local communities that, like you said, just simply don't have access to the basic financial mechanisms that we have, like a bank account or things like that, which might be a shock to some people, but there are a lot of people that operate in this space. So that is a very cool program.
Yeah, thank you. More to come.
When we get off the call, you're going to have to send me that program name so I can include that as well in the show notes, because I would definitely love to promote that.
I'll get you all the links. They're actually they're so inspiring, these guys. They're really awesome.
All right, well, let's look towards the future for Climate Collective. We're going into the final quarter of 2024, which is hard to believe. So that means 2025 is around the corner. But of course, we still have Climate Week this week, and then we've got COP29 later, and then the year is not over. But what does the future for Climate Collective look like in the coming months?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I'm really excited about. We're launching something new this fall. It really brings together two themes that we've been observing for a while, and we actually talked about both of them already. But one is this notion that Indigenous people and local communities have some of the best understanding of climate solutions or biodiversity solutions, right? They are better placed in many cases to understand what type of solution will work in the local context, or what are the actual needs or priorities of the local population, et cetera. So this sort of bottom-up, locally driven decision-making, we know is really important. And then we have this massive hype around AI. And while this excitement and hype around AI is driving a lot of startup capital to the space, most of the ideas and most of the founders that are backed are your typical startup founders. It's like a white male from the global north. And I wish all the white males from the global north the best of them. I think they're awesome. I'm married to one, so I'm totally biased here, but I don't think they have all the solutions that we need. I think we just need to kind of broaden the solution space here. So we're launching a new AI accelerator that's really drawing on our previous experience in building impactful accelerators. We've done this now for 3 years, as well as our vast community and the long list of strategic partners that we have to identify and back more representative or more diverse AI founders that are working on locally appropriate solutions or creating local applications of other sort of globally scalable ideas. So that's probably our biggest sort of announcement for the fall.
Well, I'll look forward to hearing more about that once you guys actually make the announcement, because that also sounds very, very interesting. All right. Well, Anna, we're going to close out here and we're going to get a little philosophical. I'm not sure if you're too familiar with the school of Stoicism or not, but one of the legendary Stoics, Epictetus, once said, "What concerns me is not the way that things are, but the way people think things are." And I feel like today in 2024, that couldn't be more relevant in many different parts of life, but we're going to tie this specifically to climate finance. So what do you think is one thing that must be done to change how people think about climate finance?
Wow. This is a big question. At the end of the day, climate finance is our willingness to pay to address the situation we have created ourselves, right? To turn this triple crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution around. I think most people assume that this is something that will be done by governments using this sort of nebulous term, climate finance. If there's something I could change, I'd like people to see that all finance should be climate finance going forward. We can't afford to spend any more non-climate finance, right? Like we're paying and then we need to compensate for what we're paying. It doesn't make sense anymore. So I don't mean that we should stop spending on, education and health, of course not. But rather that all spending by governments, by business, by people, ourselves, should be climate informed and climate aligned.
Well, I would say that Epictetus would probably be very pleased with that answer. That was a great response to, as you said, a very big question.
Thank you.
And I think that what you guys are doing at Climate Collective, especially the initiative you just talked about, is helping in that regard, right? You guys are getting more hands on deck, and that's what we need. So I think those kind of go in tandem. So brilliant response.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate the endorsement.
Yeah, exactly. I'm speaking for all Stoics here.
Yeah.
All right, Anna. Well, that is it on our time. Thank you so much for taking 40 minutes out of your day. I know you're very busy, and best of luck with everything in the coming months.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. Appreciate the conversation.
Likewise. Take care. And that is a wrap for today's episode. I'm sending a massive thank you to Anna Lerner for joining us and sharing her incredible insights on climate finance and tech innovation. And of course, a big thanks to all of you amazing listeners for tuning in. As you heard in the episode, Anna introduced a few awesome resources throughout our conversation, including reports that Climate Collective wrote on AI and green accountability. She also highlighted one of the stars in their accelerator program. So I provided links to all of these in the show notes, so scroll down there to access them. And before you go, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you're on Spotify, hit the little bell so you never miss an episode. And also, do not forget to check out our other podcast content. Our weekly newsletter series, Slice, offers quick, bite-sized updates on carbon markets, climate finance, and environmental protection. If you have any questions or if you just want to connect, feel free to email me at jtipton@gordian.strategies.com. You'll find my email address in the show notes as well. And that's it. See you next month for another Climate Finance Convo. Until then, take it easy and enjoy the final days of summer. This podcast is produced by Gordian Strategies.